is Christmas really just a repackaging of the Roman feasts? There are two feasts in Rome that are usually offered as primary candidates for the basis of Christmas being on December 25th. Saturnalia, which is the festival of the god Saturn. He's kind of a god of time, god of harvest, things like that. And then the Sol Invictus. Actually, the feast name is Dies Natalis of Sol Invictus, the birthday of the unconquerable sun. Sol is sun. Sol Invictus means unconquerable sun, the idea that the sun cannot die. And this is tied into the sun decreasing in the northern hemisphere and then increasing again after the solstice. The best thing you can do when you're reading this kind of stuff is to say, who says so? Who says so? Wait a minute. Saturnalia, who are these guys editing Wikipedia? What are their credentials? Let's look at it from a historian's perspective, and maybe we can find some truth in here. Well, when we start looking at Sol Invictus and Saturnalia, one of the things that we find out is that the celebration accounts that are recorded really don't fit the description that this atheist gave his young correspondent. So when we start looking at Saturnalia and we start researching where Saturnalia was, it was one day initially. It was on the 14th day before the calends. So December being a short month, that puts December 15th as the day of Saturnalia's celebration. Now, December 15th isn't December 25th by any stretch of the imagination. And that causes me a problem. Say, how can this be in competition, right? When we do harvest festivals, our churches want to give an alternative to Halloween. When do we do it? November 8th? No, we do it on October 31st. If the kids are not going to go trick-or-treating, they better come to the church instead if we're going to make a comparable experience for them. You want to do it on the same day. So if Saturnalia is starting on the 15th, how could that be influencing Christmas to start on the 25th? It doesn't make sense to me. Later, a new festival of Sigillaria extended the celebration to complete 7 full days. But the festival would still end on the 10th or the 9th day before the calends of January, which still falls short of the December 25th date. What it looks like, and what modern scholarship is finding, is that Christianity had absolutely no interest in changing their festivals or making festivals in order to attract the pagans. It looks like the December 25th date comes from a tradition from within Christianity itself. It's got very Christian origins. Now, let me give you the reason why. You'll notice both in the Clement and in the Hippolytus quote, they talk about Jesus' passion, his death, right? Passion play, his crucifixion. Why is that important when we're talking about Christmas? Well, we know that we never forget the cross, right? This is why he came. Jesus is the reason for the season. Well, it seems like the early Christians held that same view. And what the Christians held was an even more ancient Hebrew tradition that anybody, a major prophet, he would have either his birth or his conception land on the very same day as his death. See, they believed in symmetry. So they held that Jesus was the greatest of all that God could send to us. Therefore, his birth would be a significant date. And so they wanted to tie that into his death. Now, in the Stromata, Clement of Alexandria talks about our Savior's Genesis. Our Savior's Genesis. That Genesis doesn't mean only birth, it could mean conception. From the Christian viewpoint, the ministry starts at the point of conception because God calls you from the womb. Okay? So, if Christ's conception lines up with Christ's death, and they're using the March 25th AD 30 point as the day of Passover, of Jesus' death, crucifixion. That means his conception is on March 25th. And guess what? Romans can count. Early Christians can count. Guess what 9 months straight after March 25th lands on? December 25th. So here we have, now this isn't only a tradition within Christendom. There were some Jews who would hold that same idea, that Thomas Talley in The Origins of the Liturgical Year writes, quote, around 200 CD, Tertullian of Carthage reported the calculation that the 14th of Nisan, which is the day of the crucifixion, was March 25th. Now, it was later recognized that the Feast of Annunciation, when Gabriel does the, Hail Mary, full of grace, the commemoration of Jesus' conception would be March 25th plus 9 months. Conception would be on March 25th as well. 9 months, then you move it to Christmas. Augustine was familiar with this association as well, and he writes, for Jesus is believed to have been conceived on the 25th of March, upon which day he also suffered. Matter of fact, the Christians went one step further. They would say that the actual creation date of the universe is also March 25th. If you were to go backwards, count all the way to the beginning, March 25th is the most significant day in history because that's when the beginning of the world was, so that's when Jesus would start the new beginning, come back into the world, and that's when the new life through his death and resurrection would start as well. And that's what we have. So we've got the Biblical Archaeology Society writing that Christian authors of the time do note a connection between the solstice and Jesus' birth. Ambrose, the church father, for example, described Christ as the true son who outshone fallen gods of the old order. But early Christian writers never hint at any recent calendar engineering. They clearly don't think the date was chosen by the church. Rather, they see the coincidence as providence, as a providential sign, as natural proof that God had selected Jesus to be over false. Basically, you're going to try and give me a false copy, but the real one stands in its place. The first mention of a date for Christmas about AD 200, and the earliest celebrations we know about Christmas from 230 to 300 come in a period when Christians were not borrowing heavy from pagan traditions. They just wouldn't do that. They were being persecuted, especially around 300 with the persecutions of Diocletian. So it's interesting that this is what we find, that perhaps it has absolutely nothing to do with the winter solstice. That's just a coincidence of time that it happens around the same time of year. But the Christians were more precise than that. They said, we know when Jesus died, at least in their understanding. We count 9 months, and that's when Jesus was born, because he had to have been conceived at the same point in the day as he died. So what does this mean? This means that December 25th has its roots in Christianity. It doesn't have its roots in any pagan traditions. The December 25th date came from within the church based on church understanding of the time, and therefore is in no way, shape, or form corrupt as a pagan process.